To one and all, I am Rovi Kono, pursuing my first year MA in Political Science, and I cordially welcome you to today's Democracy Dialogue organized by Neharu Study Center, Mangalore University. We have with us Professor Rajiv Bhargav, Professor Kishore Kumar, Professor A.M. Kant, Professor Rajendra Cheney, Professor Sandeep Shastri, Professor Shashidhar as resource persons. I request Professor Tolbadi to escort the dignitaries to the dais. Since its inception last year, this is the fourth program Neharu Study Center has organized talks and discussions on various issues. And today we have amidst us a very eminent and prolific scholar, Professor Rajiv Bhargav, who will be speaking to us on the topic Indian Secularism, Nehru's Contributions, which would be followed by the three discussants, Professor Rajendra Cheney, Professor Sandeep Shastri, Professor R. Shashidhar, and Professor Kumar will preside over the session. As a student of political science Professor Rajiv Bhargav's name has been well known to us, and having him amongst us today is a great honor and an education itself. We look forward to a very fruitful and engaging session. And over to you, sir.
Good morning and welcome. Before we start our program, I request all of you to stand up for a minute because Professor Raghavendra Rao, who was the founder, chairman and professor of Department of Political Science, passed away recently. As a respect, as a mark of our respect, we will maintain 1 minute silence. This is the fourth program of Neharu Study Center of Mangalore University. The Neharu Study Center came up last year, and ever since then, we have been trying to organize different kinds of programs, of which democracy dialogue is one. And we have had quite a few people speaking on different aspects of Indian politics, particularly the normative politics. It actually started with Professor Yogendra Yadav speaking on Nehru and Lohiya. This program, which is the fourth one, Professor Rajiv Bhargav is going to speak to us on Indian secularism and contributions of Nehru. I need not, in fact, introduce Professor Bhargav. Most of us know by his writings. But still, I think many of our students may not be fully aware of the kind of scholarship that Professor Bhargav has. I thought, I'll give a very personal kind of an introduction, in the sense that, I don't want to read out any CV, but I want to introduce Professor Bhargav to the extent I know him. I think I know Professor Bhargav for the last 20 years or so. When he came to our department to deliver a series of lectures on Western political theory. From that time onwards, I think I have been, if not very regularly, I think frequently meeting Professor Bhargav in different occasions. I was also having the fortune of working with Professor Bhargav when I was in CSDS for 2 years, where he is a senior professor. Professor Bhargav is a well-known political theorist, and he is known for his political theory, very analytical kind of philosophy and political theory. And he has to the extent I know, two major works on political theory, Western political theory. Why do we do it? Is in fact the most important. More than that, I think Professor Bhargav is known to me personally for his scholarship on secularism. And I think, I have read, if not all, most of his writings on secularism. And I'm very personally fascinated about the kind of, theoretical rigor that I see in Professor Bhargav's writings on secularism. Professor Bhargav was a student of Charles Taylor, and his PhD thesis was on methodological individualism. which he subsequently published. Professor Bhargav has a long list of publications. 2 or 3 major books I immediately recall: Liberalism, Democracy and Multiculturalism. One book has edited, Ethics and Politics of Indian Constitution. Secularism and its Critics, the book has edited, and a large number of other kinds of very different kinds of writings. So he's an internationally acknowledged scholar on political theory as well as on secularism. I find it personally very happy to have Rajiv Bhargav with us today, and I had insisted that he should be with us for the entire day. I think he would be with us for most part of the day, if not the entire day. So I, on behalf of Neharu Study Center, and on behalf of Mangalore University, and on behalf of everybody here, I very deeply indebted to his coming, and I welcome him on this program. I also welcome our dear Vice Chancellor, Professor Kishore Kumar, who has always been very kind and cooperative. Even sometimes, I was telling him yesterday, that I have not informed him earlier about this program. Almost, kind of, because, we were colleagues, and that I thought I can take that liberty, and I have requested him to come here, and he has obliged. I'm very deeply thankful to him for coming here. We have 3, very distinct scholars who would actually respond to Professor Rajiv Bhargav's presentation on secularism. 3 very distinct and very different kinds of scholars. Professor Rajendra Cheni, Professor of English, Columbia University, and we all know him for the kind of brilliant writings that he makes, particularly in Kannada. Very active and very socially committed. We have Professor Sandeep Shastri, and political science students know Professor Sandeep Shastri for the kind of election studies he has been doing. He's part of CSTS. Professor Bhargav is also part of CSTS. And we have Professor Shashidhar, who is our own friend. So these 3 scholars will actually respond to Professor Rajiv Bhargav's presentation. And then Professor Rajiv Bhargav will respond to their responses. After that, we will have a general discussion. That's going to be our morning's program. In the afternoon, we have Professor Valerian Rodriguez, who was also part of our department. He is going to actually moderate a general discussion, an open-ended discussion on whatever important issues that we think about contemporary Indian politics. That's going to be in the afternoon after the lunch break. I personally thank all these 3 friends of mine, Shastri, Professor Shastri, Professor Shashidhar and Professor Cheni, for coming here, for obliging my kind of invitation to be part of this. We have a lot of friends, my friends. I don't call their names. They are personal friends, and they are also in some sense my colleagues. So I very warmly welcome my colleagues and friends, teachers, research students, media persons. Registrar is expected to come. I also, in his absence, welcome him. I welcome all my friends who are very deeply concerned about the kind of issue that we are discussing today. So welcome everybody.
Token of our appreciation and respect, I request Dharmaraya to welcome Professor Rajiv Bhargav. Manjula to welcome Professor Kishore Kumar. Madhushri to welcome Professor Rajendra Cheni. Malika to welcome Professor Sandeep Shastri. And Shivraj to welcome Professor R. Shashida. I will now hand over the rest of the time to Professor Rajiv Bhargav, who will be speaking to us on Indian secularism, Nehru's contributions. Sir, we look forward to a very fruitful and engaging session. Over to you, sir.
On to Indian secularism, and it's a very pertinent topic, because Nehru is seen as somebody who was, this is a stereotype, that Nehru is seen as a hard secularist who is not just anti-communal but also anti-religious. He is the exemplar of Western Enlightenment, and not only in his personal life, but as a what he contributed in terms of what he contributed to the public philosophy of India, which was also in some ways, or at least for some time, the official philosophy of India. His views are believed to be not only different from Gandhi and a whole lot of others, but also different from constitutional secularism. That is to say, secularism that is found in the Indian Constitution, which is a product of a negotiated settlement between people of very different perspectives, different worldviews. But Nehru is believed to be the more radical of all others, who was very impatient with religion, who thought of religion as a storehouse of superstition, obscurantism, and falsehoods. He more or less believed that it was sort of false consciousness, and therefore, hopefully, as people themselves gain knowledge and enlightenment, they will get rid of religious consciousness and not just religious institutions. Now, I always suspected. I mean, there were people who thought that maybe in his later years he became a little more religious. After all, and not just religious, but also in some ways Hindu. That some people did believe, but some people did. I mean, those who thought of him as a hard secularist actually thought that he was betraying secularism, because remember when in his will, he had written that his ashes are to be distributed all over India, and that they thought was a mark of somebody who is still, in some ways, exemplifying a very old-fashioned quasi-religious consciousness, and it's a little obscurantist to think in these terms. I mean, once you are dead, you are gone, and there is no reason for you to believe that it will make any difference to anybody, where your ashes go and so on. So that's also something that people associate with Nehru. But by and large, the view is that he is a very hard-headed secularist. But when I looked at some of Nehru's writings, Nehru didn't write systematically on this subject. I mean, he wrote on, as you know, he's written on popular history, he's written on the civilization of India and in the discovery of India. In his autobiography, he takes his public persona very seriously. So, and he writes a book called Letters to his own daughter. That was letters written from prison to Indira Gandhi and so on. So lots of writings of this kind, but no systematic writing on religion and secularism. But there are a number of short essays and his speeches and his letters, which are available in his selected works and his collected works, and I went through most of that and came to the conclusion that his views actually are unusually subtle, complex, and in fact remain acutely relevant in India today. So, the first thing that is to be noted about Nehru is that he was comfortable neither with the term religion nor with the word secular. He didn't think that these were adequate to the phenomena which they tried to designate, or whose meaning that these words capture. He was quite critical. And I'm going to begin with religion. My presentation will be divided into two parts. The first part will cover Nehru's views on religion. The second part will cover his views on secular and secularism. So, on religion, he has this to say. It's very interesting. He says, and I'm quoting him from his autobiography, "The word religion has lost all precise significance and only causes confusion. It would be better if it was dropped from use altogether." So much for this person who knows what religion is and who wants to attack religion all the time. He's in fact saying that I'm not very happy using the term religion. If I use it, it's only because everybody else uses it and we haven't got a better term for it. Now, but the main thing to understand is, what is it that made him say that? And to grasp that, or to help us, both myself and you, grasp why he thought so, I like to draw you into a thought experiment. It's a kind of a longue durée, speculative history of the religio-philosophical history of humankind. It's a kind of a Twitterati history in today's language. It's just quick 5 minutes, 7-step or 8-step history of humankind. So let me begin this 7-step, 7-stage history of humankind. So let's say at some point of time in the very distant past, we, human beings, developed a capacity for transcendence. We were not born with this capacity. Over a period of time, we developed it. And what do I mean by transcendence? That we could step back from our current situation, from our current self, from our current understanding of the world. We could step back and look beyond, and to holistically examine our life, our world, ourselves, to see what our own limitations are, and subsequently develop an aspiration to overcome these limitations, right? I hope this is clear. That's what transcendence means, to go beyond your existing situation. And you want to go beyond your existing situation because you find the existing situation inadequate. In some ways, you are not very comfortable with it. So you understand that you have an empirical assessment of what it is, and you have an aspiration to overcome all its inadequacies and limitations. And so you also see that there is a gap between what you currently are and what your current world is like, and what you could become at your best, and what you can make, how you can transform the world so that it is adequate to an image of it that you have developed, which is your normative image of how it should be, right? And you have developed this idea, and you are also developed this aspiration, this ambition to try and overcome this gap, right? I hope this is clear, because, but it will become clear later in a few minutes as well. So people realize that they have to develop themselves. They have to, they are imperfect and they have to perfect themselves. That there is something latent in them, and that is to be brought out, and therefore they have to make it real. So they have to realize themselves. So they develop these ideas of self-development, self-perfection, self-realization, and so on. And sometimes, if they are too concerned about dying in this world, and dying in an imperfect way in this world, not having achieved what they wish to achieve, then they also wish to get ideas and images of what is it that will save them eventually in the final assessment, when they, whatever that form of assessment is, and wherever they reach, they will be judged, and they have to find ways of being saved from all the papa or sins or all the wrongdoings that they have committed. So they have these ideals, these high ideals, and they strive to realize these ideals. And that requires a lot of effort on their part to what we can say, to reform themselves. It's a project of self-formation and self-reformation and so on. All right? So this is in the very first stage, as I said, in this speculative history of humankind, we're talking about human beings who have developed this capacity. They're no longer happy with the world as it is. They're not just happy with existing as they are. They develop this capacity to overcome all the limitations of this world and to change themselves. And so they develop an image of what the best world is, what their best image of themselves is, and as I said, they try to realize it, and they develop high ideals and so on. Now, this idea, this perspective that they have now, which they didn't have before, this perspective may be God-dependent. Some people may feel that this is possible only when they have faith in God. They surrender to God. That's possible. The other option could be that they don't believe in one God, they believe in many gods and goddesses. And so they this world view that they've now developed is not dependent on any one God, but gods and goddesses dependent. And the third possibility is that they believe that this normative image that they have, through which they will achieve perfection, this is not dependent on any god or any gods and goddesses. Right? So, and as a matter of fact, you might argue that in this God-independent, or gods and goddesses independent perspective, you have faith in reason and in fact your own reason on human rationality, and it is through human rationality that you will realize yourself, you will perfect yourself, you will be able to develop your full potential. Okay. Now, these God-independent ideals were developed in Greece. We know that there were many in Greek philosophers were very much. Many of the Greek philosophers are, by our standards, pretty. Now you can call them some secular, but they were developed in India even before Greek philosophers. You know, our old Buddhism is God independent. It's gods and goddesses independent. There were later Buddhisms which accommodated the idea of gods and goddesses, but Buddhism is not dependent on any god. It's very, you know, you can say it's a humanist. Right? It's your karma, right? And Jainism is another philosophy which is atheistic. As a matter of fact, the entire Mimamsa tradition in the Vedic worldview is also completely independent of gods and goddesses. It doesn't talk. It's also atheistic. Sankhya is also atheistic by and large. So early India, you might say, was very strongly atheistic, and later in India, but even at the, I don't want to make this claim that this happened chronologically, but let's say that in early India, all these the people developed these normative worldviews after having this idea of transcendence, and they developed these perspectives which were independent of God, and I mentioned them, dependent on gods and goddesses, and there were many in the Vedic tradition that believed in many gods and goddesses, and they were also developing conceptions which were dependent on one God, Ishvara, who was, who was not, who was exemplified by gods and goddesses, but who was also in some ways independent of these gods and goddesses. And the idea developed in India. I'm sorry, I've just moved to India because that's the real issue that we, Neharu, which is important to Neharu, and also for all of us. The idea developed at that time in ancient India that each of these perspectives, each of these normative perspectives of self-realization, self-development, each of them is sufficient and none is necessary. You don't have to, in order to realize your ultimate goal, your highest ideals, you don't have to believe in God. But if you believe in God, that will be sufficient to get you there. You may be an atheist. You don't have to be an atheist. But if you were an atheist, you could still achieve that. And you don't have to believe in only gods and goddesses, but if you were gods, if you believe in gods and goddesses, that is sufficient for you to get there. So let's say there were already a pluralist world, and there were different margas, paths, ways by which you could achieve self-perfection, self-realization, the ultimate goal could be achieved, and so on. Okay, that's the first major step in human, let's say, human history, and I've exemplified that by India. Now let's say that the second step is that, I mean, actually I've already gone in outlining and thickening my description of the first step. I've already, in a sense, taken the second step. But the second step actually is that for many of these paths on margas, there were some very brilliant, insightful teachers. And human beings who had been searching for these ultimate goals began to depend on these teachers to show them the way, to give them some light on how to achieve all this, right? So let's say there are these people who have developed this idea of transcendence, and they are looking for how to get to the ultimate ideals, but they're confused. They stray from the idea of how to get there, and they are looking for somebody to give them clarity, to give them some guidance, and they find a teacher who has already achieved that, and they begin to follow that teacher. This happens very commonly in the Indian, particularly in the Indian tradition, but not just India. You can think of Christianity, where Jesus is believed to be the prophet, but he's first and foremost a teacher. You might say even later in Muhammad, he's later treated as a prophet, but initially he's first and foremost a teacher, right? So let's say we found, we're looking for a path, and we find a teacher and we begin to follow him. And of course, that's a third step. Now come to this third step. As people become followers of a teacher, they realize that they are not the only ones. There are other people who are doing the same. They are also following this teacher. And they recognize each other as following this teacher. So they begin to form a loose community, some kind of an ethical community. It's not just one person following a teacher, it's a loose community following a teacher. And this loose community has very, very important functions, because they are crucial for mutual reinforcement, for mutual influence, and for mutual learning. You cannot stray, even if you find a brilliant teacher who you follow. That teacher alone is not enough. There are other people who are as crucial to help you follow the path. So you form a certain ethical community, and so I would say that self-development is a guided social activity. The other followers and teachers are both very, very important for you to realize your ultimate goal, to realize your highest ideals, to develop yourself fully. Now, I've gone, into this long detour and talked to you about self-realization and the 3 steps to achieve it and so on. What is the connection with Neharu? Well, for Neharu, this entire gamut of beliefs and practices, which involves these 3 steps, the first step, the second step, and the third step, all of them Nehru is prepared to call religion. This is religion. And this religion, because there are so many paths, there are multiple, there are plural, this religion is not just God dependent. It's not just gods and goddesses dependent. It can also be independent of God. And Nehru recognizes the inherent plurality of religion. And you can also see that in this perspective, there is no real distinction between religion and philosophy. Because people generally associate religion with God and gods and goddesses. And they associate atheism without gods and goddesses, and therefore, since it's dependent on reason, human reason, they think of it as philosophy. But as we know, that distinction doesn't hold. Many of these God-dependent perspectives have a philosophical dimension to them. And many of these God-independent perspectives can develop elements of religiosity in them. So the distinction between religion and philosophy doesn't hold. That's why I'll just call them this religion. It's a religio-philosophical worldview. All right. Now, for Nehru, this is religion. But this is not all there is to religion. He sometimes uses the word religion only for this. But then he also develops another understanding of religion. And to understand that, let's just continue with our thought experiment and take some other steps. These 3 steps are very important for any religion and philosophy, right? These are absolutely crucial. But sometimes people don't stop there, they take other steps. What are these other steps? So imagine, what I said was that there is an ethical community, and there is a teacher, and there is an idea of self-realization. But this ethical community, let's say the teacher is now dead, there is some loose ethical community, but now this ethical community develops certain institutional structure. And this institutional structure develops some power relations, some relations of hierarchy. There are some status, the differences in status that come into it. So some people within the structure, they don't see each other as just equals now. Some people within the structure are higher, and some people are lower. Some people exercise power, and other people are under the exercise of someone else's power. These relations become very important in this institutionalized structure. There are hierarchies, as I said, that develop. And some people in this hierarchy take upon themselves to systematize the teachings of the teacher. They give them coherence and they turn them into doctrines. Now they are doctrines. I'll say that this is the development of the 4th and the 5th step. A semi-bureaucratized institutional structure which is full of hierarchy and power, and teachings are not just teachings, they have turned into intellectual doctrines which have an element of dogma in them. So now, if people want to perfect themselves, which is very basic to human beings, this idea of transcendence, I want to improve myself, I want to go beyond what I am, I want to transcend myself. My world is it's not a very happy place. I want to make this world better. I want to transcend this world. These are ideas which everybody has, or should have, or do develop over time. But now, in order to be able to do all this, in order to practice religion in the first sense, let's call it religion A, those 3-4 steps that I talked about earlier. In order to practice religion A, now they have to become a member of this institutionalized community. Now they have to learn not just the teachings, but they have to learn these doctrines. These become the condition of your self-improvement, of either finding God or finding that world, ultimate goal, and so on. So pursuit of religion A now depends upon belonging to this highly institutionalized and doctrine-bound community. And with this, a quality, religiousness, which belongs to human beings, is externalized, it's reified, and it becomes external to you. And now you belong to this. Religiosity or religiousness is something that is a feature, a quality of human beings. I'm religious, I'm practicing this, but instead of that, say I'm not, it's not, my religiousness is not important. I have to belong to this institutionalized structure. I have to belong to this community. I have to surrender not to God, but to people in this institutionalized structure, into whoever is the highest in this hierarchy. So this is a new change that is taking place in the history of humankind. And now another step is taken. There are some people who are very powerful and who are hierarchically, who have given themselves a higher status in this structure. They become gatekeepers. They decide who's going to enter into this community and who's not going to enter. It's no longer my choice. As I said, initially, I'm looking for self-realization. I find this, and I go into this teachings, into a particular set of teachings, follow a teacher, follow my group members. But now there is somebody there who says, no, unless you are able to do this, you cannot enter. Or if you deviate from this, you will be told to get out. So these kind of gatekeepers develop. And next step is, a further step is taken, in step 6 or 7, I forget, that since these already, in the very original condition, there were plural communities. One god, many gods and goddesses, no god, and variations within these communities. After this bureaucratized structure is developed, these rigid hierarchies are developed, gatekeepers have come into being, rules of exit and entry. Now people begin to see each other as rivals. They fight each other, and they fight each other in such a way that they're even prepared to break each other's heads. Each one is saying, you are false, I have the true religion, I am superior, you are inferior. And in order to establish that, you're even prepared to kill each other. Let's say that this final thing, now this, once all these steps have taken, the religion A is transformed and has become religion B. It's a completely different thing. Now Nehru, I would say, so it would be so helpful. This is the problem that Nehru faces. And remember, Nehru said, I don't know what to do with religion. It means too many things. But at least it means these two things. It either means just those religion A with those 3-4 steps, which is absolutely central to human existence, or religion B, which is religion A having taken all those other steps. And because religion can mean this or that, Nehru says, forget it now, best to. Nehru is very critical of religion B and very reverential towards religion A. He finds A indispensable, extremely important, and he loves the plurality of religion A, right? Which I've already mentioned. But he hates the rigidity, the dogma, and the violence which is inherent in religion B. So, if Nehru wishes that he could disentangle the two, call it just one religion and not the other. But the world doesn't allow that, because many religions have taken these 7, 8 steps. They can't see themselves outside of those 7, 8 steps. They define themselves in terms of these steps. This gatekeeper quality, this true and false and superior, inferior quality, this exclusionary quality, and the violence which is inherent in it, all this is part of religion. 2. So, he wishes that these would be disentangled, but he just doesn't know how to do it. And so he says, well, I'm going to sometimes use religion in this sense and sometimes in that sense. Both are religions. I hate religion B. I love religion A. I wish I could call religion B or religion A except differently, but I can't. Therefore, I will continue to use it, sometimes in this way, sometimes in that way. And my philosophy, my political philosophy will naturally depend on whether I'm talking about religion A or religion B or about both. So, like Gandhi, Nehru can't see how politics could be conducted without religion A. It could be all of religion A, with all the variations, or it could be any one. He doesn't understand how politics could be conducted without some philosophy that depends on God, or some philosophy that depends on gods and goddesses, or some philosophy which are totally independent of God. One of them, or all of them, have to influence politics. You can't get rid of that. It's impossible to separate. All human activities will have something from one of these, if not all of these. But like Gandhi, and this is where they're similar, like Gandhi, you wouldn't want to mix politics with large elements of religion be. How could hatred, how could exclusion, how could violence, how could power structures, how could they enter? Politics, democratic politics, where you've constitutional politics, where equality and freedom are central. Because these are essentially against politics, against equality, freedom. They perpetuate domination. So you can't mix them. And that's why Gandhi and Nehru both make these statements. On the one hand, they say we can't see how religion and politics can be mixed. And they also say we can't see how they can be separated. But that contradiction is resolved once you see that religion can be both religion A and religion B. And if you cannot separate them, sometimes people will there will always be ambivalence. Sometimes people will say, we are for religion, and sometimes sane people, sensible people like Nehru and Gandhi, sometimes they will say we are against. You can't have just one view on this matter. Okay. Let's just move to secular now. There's Nehru's, you can see how complicated, how complex, how subtle, how nuanced his views on religion are. It doesn't change. There's no call early Nehru and late Nehru. And you can see that, some people accuse him of being, some atheists, Western atheists, accuse him of being Hindu. And most Hindus don't see him as Hindu. It's very peculiar. But you can see why they accuse him of being Hindu, because he is not, he's not anti a perspective which is for with gods and goddesses, or with God. He's fine with them, but he cannot be all right as a Democrat, as a freedom-loving person. He cannot be happy with what's happening. Sometimes we call it in the name of religion, but actually Nehru doesn't think that it's just in the name of religion. That is religion also. We've got to recognize that. And unless we collectively do something about that religion B and make sure that religion is largely religion A, unless that happens, our ambivalence towards religion will remain. Okay, let's come to secular. On the word secular, this is what he has to say. Again, I quote, "The word secular is perhaps not a happy one, and yet for want of a better one, we use it and call our state a secular state." This is just one quotation. not very happy with secular. And I understand it, because religion and secular are part of, they are a binary. If you have religion, you might want to be secular. If you have secular, that can only be in response to religion. It's a binary. They come together. If you have problems with religion, you will have problems with secular. If you can't get rid of religion, you will not get rid of secular. So, he is not very happy with secular. Okay, but what's his conception of a secular state? He says, but, whatever state we have, we'll call it secular. I'm not very happy with it, but I'll call it secular. But what is the secular state? So he's very clear. He said, no matter how great one's, this is to do with what is the relationship of the state with religion A? What is this concept? What is the relation of state with religion B? We have to disentangle. And then we will come to his understanding of what secular state is, what secularism for Nehru is. Okay. So he says, no state should identify with any of these religion A's. You can't identify. They're all great. Only religion A is great for Nehru. You have to revere them. But you can't identify. The moment you identify with one, you're actually causing a problem. You're causing a problem because you're excluding people of other religions. So there are only two possibilities. Either your state has distanced itself from all religion A's, the good religion, or it is nourished by all religions A's. These are the only two possibilities. Nehru is open to both. You can be nourished by all, or you distance yourself from all. All great philosophies, all great religions, all great religious philosophical. But you cannot align yourself. You can't have an Islamic state, or a Hindu Rashtra, or a Christian state, or a papal state, or a Buddhist state. So, you can't have what had happened in Pakistan, or Sri Lanka, or Saudi Arabia, nor can you have states which are very close alliance with any one church religion, like in Denmark or in England. They are very weak now, but till 100 years ago, they were very strong and they caused a lot of problems. They are still there, but they are considerably weakened, so the problems don't show up anymore. But there is a close alliance between state and religion in England. England is an Anglican. England gives monopolistic privileges to the Anglican Church. Not just to Christianity, but to one sect of Christianity, to one church of Christianity. So does Denmark, to Lutherans. Nehru said that what about people living there who are not Anglicans or not Lutherans? Now, I don't know what he would have said. I'm sure today, given the unprecedented diversity in places like England, Nehru would say, please don't have any attachment to one particular church. Because there are Hindus, there are Muslims, there are Sikhs, there are Buddhists, all kinds of people living over there. What would they feel if the state declares that they are only attached to one? Then you're treating others as second-class citizens. In some ways, at least. Not fully. England has a lot of rights which are given to all communities. But it's still preferential treatment. Well, it's tolerable. It's not too bad. But ideally, not a great thing. Anyway, this is one. So on this, he's very clear. And he says that he accepts that. And this is again one charge that is made on Nehru. Some people who don't understand the complexities of these things, they think that Nehru had a Hinduized outlook. Nehru says that for Nehru, you can read his autobiography, you can read his Discovery of India. See, there is a certain tradition which you can't dismantle just like that. So even if there are many different religions there, the multiple traditions in a society will shape the structure of the polity in a certain way. So you may have a sort of a mildly Christian outlook in Europe and a mildly, broadly speaking, Hindu outlook in India. So he says, that may be so. It's possible. But even if that is the case, your state should not be Hindu. There should not be, you cannot do that. Don't declare that. But that's going to be very destabilizing. There's a difference between having a very subtle kind of shape. I mean, it's a fact that Indian Christianity, Indian Islam, Indian whatever, is shaped by, is very different from Middle Eastern Christianity, Western European Christianity. Western European Christianity is very different from Central European Christianity. Central European Christianity is different from Russian Orthodox or Greek Orthodox Christianity. And likewise, all these Christianities are bound to be very different from Indian Christianity. In Kerala, you can find Virgin Mary sitting with a sari on an elephant. You wouldn't find that anywhere else in any other Christian society. So this can happen. This will happen. But that is not the same as having a state be Hindu. So that's one very clear. He says that if you do that, then you are actually pushing people into an inferior and marginal status. So don't do that. Have a secular state, by which he means do not align yourself with any one religion. Even if that religion is just religion A, the philosophy, the ethical worldview, the normative perspective, the highest ideals. Don't say we are just for this. Okay. Second, he says, well, in that society, in your society, all religions, this is our Indian tradition, all religions must be respected. All places of worship must be respected. You should guarantee all religious practices, the freedom of practice to all religions. In other words, there should not be, and this is a term that I'm using, Nehru doesn't use it in this context, but he uses it for something else. There should not be inter-religious domination. No religion should dominate any other religion. That's the very fundamental feature of a secular state. All religions must be respected. No religion should be identified with the state. This is a very important feature, right? And when we are thinking of citizenship rights, active citizenship rights, passive citizenship rights, what are passive citizenship rights? Passive citizenships are what you receive from the state. You don't have to do very much. Of course, some things you have to do. In India, you have to do something about towards the fulfillment of every right. Okay? But in most other societies, there are some rights that are fulfilled without you having to do anything. Your roads will be built. You don't have to agitate. Your clean water will come to you. You don't have to agitate. Right? A clean environment will be given to you. You don't have to agitate. These are passive citizenship rights. Right? You're passive in relation to the state, and the state gives you certain things. They're basic welfare. Right? Now, in the distribution of these rights, please don't discriminate among citizens. Don't give it to Hindus, but not to Muslims or to Christians. Supposing there is an earthquake, and you have to set up rehabilitation camps. You can't say these camps are only for Hindus but not for Muslims in an area which is equally affected by and equally impacts every community. That's blatantly wrong. So you don't do that. But then there are active citizenship rights. What are they? I have a right to vote. I have a right to participate in the public sphere. I can write to the newspaper. I can write in the social media. I can write in the, I can appear on television. On any matter, I can make it public and hope that that matter will be discussed because it's of importance to all of us. I have a right to do that. And I have a right to stand for public office. I can stand to be a member of the legislature, a member of parliament. I can stand for the highest offices of the land. I can be the prime minister, the president, the vice president. I can be the chief of army. All of these, I should not be discriminated against. These are offices, and you cannot have offices tied only to one community and not to the other. A secular state must be able to do that. Okay, so these are, Nehru thinks that this is a very important feature of secular state. But he doesn't stop there. His conception of a secular state is broader. He says, remember, religion be. He doesn't mind the state interfering in any activity of one community or any activity of the state which damages other religious communities. I can't harm other religious communities. And if the state harms another religious community, I must be able to appeal to the Constitution and stop that harm coming the way of that minority or that other religious community. So that's to prevent inter-religious domination is one very important feature of a secular state. But he doesn't stop there. He says, well, remember, religion be, which is the root cause of a lot of problems, those other 5 steps. The religion be is not just doesn't have the resources just to oppress other communities. Its basic problem is that it oppresses its own people. It oppresses members of its own community. Some people within the community oppress members of their own community. They want women to wear certain clothes, they don't want them to go to certain temples, they want untouchables not to come to the temples, they want, all kinds of, certain people are forever outcast or they are not allowed to do certain things. And this is not happening to people of other religions, that's happening to people in no religion. So he says that, and this is very clearly stated in his speeches and in his writings. A secular state must stand against casteism, oppressive caste structure. A lot of things to say about untouchability too. It cannot stand untouchable. One of the most degrading practices. Not sanctioned by, for many people it's not sanctioned by Hindu scriptures, but for some people it's sanctioned by Hindu scriptures. Hindu scripture is not a right term. Hindu books which are seen to be Hindu religious texts. So that banning untouchability would be like interfering in a religion. And he says secular state must be able to interfere in these. There are too degrading, two practices. I think if for Nehru's secular, he would be deeply upset about what is happening in the Sabarimala. There's just no way that he would be able to tolerate it, as many people don't think today. He just won't be able to tolerate it. You can do, you don't not let some people get into the temple, period. On biological grounds, because of their color or because of their life cycles or because, how can you prevent people? It's nature, it's part of us. We're born like that. You can't say I'm not going to have people who are disadvantaged for one reason or the other, whether it's permanent or temporary. Well, first of all, what is this business of seeing something as a disadvantage? You would challenge that as well. But even if you see it as a disadvantage, you say, why? How does that? That way, no change will take place in any religion. Then you will make people anti-religious. Because the only way to escape, to get your freedom, is to become anti-religious. So if you prevent, I'm just giving an example, you prevent people from going to the Ayappa temple, some women. So they want to, and you're not allowing them. That means you are not allowing them to be Hindu in the way they want to be. At the very extreme, they'll say, we leave Hindus. Why should we be Hindu? We don't want to be. They'll begin by saying, okay, to hell with Ayappa temple. I'm going to go to some other temple. And if there also they have a problem, they'll say, to hell with that temple, I'll go to some other religion. The only way in which you can be part of your religion, to flourish, to help your religion grow and to help it flourish, is by keep changing it. Because then people will not leave it. So, in fact, all reforms within Hinduism are to protect Hinduism. Not to, this is the bit that everybody gives, anti-Hindu, anti-Hindu. No. If you do not do any changes within Islam or Christianity or Parsi or Jain, you do it only in Hindu. What are you doing? You're ensuring that that your religion changes, but you don't leave it. That means, you are actually protecting the size of that community, if you are looking at it from that point of view. Why do people today, how many Christians have ceased to be Christians in Western Europe? Enormous number. The church is facing a crisis. Why? Because of the dogma. Because of a certain way in which you have to do certain things. People don't want that. So they've stopped. People have rejected the dogma, the doctrine in Western Europe. That's why they're atheists, they're agnostic, they're secular. A large part of Western Europeans don't believe in Christianity anymore. There's a crisis in Christian faith, and people don't want to go to the church. They go to the church only for social purposes. Marriage, everybody, you're meeting everybody, therefore you go to the church, right? But there are many people who don't want their children to be baptized. There's a real crisis. If only these changes had taken place within Christianity, or some options were introduced, some plurality had been introduced, Christianity wouldn't be in such a crisis. So, for me, as a pluralist, it's a disaster, because I don't want a world in which there are only people who believe in, who don't believe in God. I want people in gods and who believe in gods and goddesses. I want people who believe in one God. I want all of them. I hate if one tribe disappears. That'll be a destruction of pluralism. I don't want it to be like that. But I'm seeing the destruction of a certain kind of pluralism because a lot of people in Western Europe, I'm just talking about Western Europe, but also in Latin America. Latin America, Christianity thrives because you can be, in Brazil, I just came from Brazil. In Brazil, you can be a Christian, but you can also belong to some other spiritual religion. You can be, it's pretty much like what has been part of the Hindu so-called culture. You can have multiple allegiances. You can be this and that, and all sorts of things are possible. Well, in our times, that's the way to be. There is no reason why you have to be forced into just being one. You can be one if you want, but if you want to learn from the teachings of Buddha and from the teachings of Christ, what's wrong with that? Nothing wrong with that. In Brazil, people don't think there's anything wrong with it. So there are all kinds of interesting, ways in which people are practicing their faiths. In Western Europe, at the time when the crisis emerged, there was only one way, and people just left it. So, I'm sorry I went into this digression, but the point I'm making is that destroying caste hierarchies is essential. That's where I think I'm disagreeing with Ambedkar here, or Ambedkarites. Ambedkar believed that it's such a central part of Hinduism that by destroying it, you're destroying Hinduism. But I think that it's not a central part of Hinduism. It's only one feature. If you destroy it, Hinduism will survive. Caste structure caste hierarchies, not caste as a community. Caste hierarchies must go. Untouchability must go. Purity and pollution must go. That's the only way to save that faith in the long run. Anyway, I've spoken enough, but on the last point, and I'll stop. I think I've enough. I've done 45, 50 minutes. Okay, last point. The last, not just caste relations, but Nehru had some very interesting things to say in the 1930s, in the late 20s throughout the 30s. He said many things which he thought today we would call patriarchy. He never used that word, but so for example, he says, this is what he says, I'm quoting now. This is when he's in Prayag Vidyapeeth in 1934 or 35. He's speaking and he says, our civilization, customs, laws are all made by man, and he has taken good care to keep himself in superior positions and treat women as chattel. So in addition to a political struggle, I can't read my own handwriting, so in addition to women have to fight for, in addition to political independence, which women must fight for, women have to fight also for social independence. And he has many things to say against the parda, against the way we understand the whole relationship of marriage. And he's very clear that these are things in which a good, democratic, freedom-loving state must intervene. A secular state must be against intra-religious domination. That is to say, any domination that is exercised by one religious community, members of one religious community, against members of another religious community. Against members of their own religious community. And that's largely the deeply marginalized people, the untouchables, so-called, and women. To give them the same status, to give them equality and freedom, the state has to intervene. So, in some things, you keep religion away. In many things, you help religion, and in some, by intervening, right? So, as I said, he has this idea of respecting religion, of supporting educational institutions, and so on. But in many things you have to be against. It has to be a very complex attitude, and therefore his secularism also has to be very complicated. And I'll end finally with one thing. If you have this very complicated view about religion and about religion, you see religion as not just religion in a narrow sense, but religion philosophy. And if you have a view that this is these are all traditions, long traditions, then your attitude to traditions will also be very interesting and ambivalent. And that was the case with Nehru. There were, people would find it odd if they heard the attitude that he had towards Sanskrit. You'd say, this English-speaking westernized man, what does he have to say about Sanskrit? Well, there are lots and lots of writings where he thinks of Sanskrit as a heritage of the whole of India, where you have to use it as a very important tool of access to those traditions, and therefore making it a part of your living heritage. And I think he would say that about all religious traditions. I haven't read enough. I was only interested in this particular passage because of his the tirade against Nehru as somebody who's against traditions, against Hindus, against. So I think, in fact, the lesson that I draw from this is two, three things. One is, okay, not many, I'll just draw one lesson. That I think when you are critical of some aspects of religion, largely religion B, your critique will have so much more weight if you have, even if you don't fully identify with it, if you have a thorough understanding, a deep understanding of the traditions of religion A. One big problem in many of us is that we are very quick to criticize Islam without understanding a thing about Islam. No understanding of anything about Islam or about its traditions, about its strengths. But not just that. Those who criticize Hinduism have no understanding of Hinduism. They have nothing to do with that. They are completely illiterate. And those who criticize the Hindu tradition also have no understanding of Hindu tradition. Your critique must not be shallow. It must come from the inner depths of the tradition to which that which you are criticizing belongs. There is nothing unambiguously good or bad. But to criticize the bad in something, you have to know what is good in it. And it's only when you are armed with that you can looking into the eye of the spokespersons of those traditions, you can attack them. And I think this is something that we have to learn to do because much of our education system has been deeply flawed in this respect. That wasn't the case before independence. It was not even the case by the 1960s. But in Nehru's period, this was not the case. But in the so-called Nehruvian period, which I think begins 7 or 8 years after Nehru's death, in that period, and it lasted only 10 years, I think we played havoc with our education system and made it impossible for us to learn anything about our own traditions, which means that those of us who are very critical of some aspects of our tradition don't know how to do it, and when we do it in a very shallow way. Okay, and Nehru was against that. Thank you.